Good morning. We have one microphone today, so we'll be handing it back and forth quite often. To start off, my name is Tammi Dice. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a substance abuse therapist. I've worked here with the Farley Center for several years. I am also in the second year of my doctoral program at Old Dominion University's Counselor Education program. I also facilitate a safe space LGBTQ information seminar throughout the year. And so this, we've been doing this for quite a while. I hope to cover a lot today. This 2 hours we spend together is a consolidation of a 2-day workshop, which is a consolidation of a semester-long program. So we're going to be covering a lot today in a short period of time.
Good morning. I am Dr. Tammi Dice. I am an associate dean at Old Dominion University. I'm also a professor of counseling and human services, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. We are looking forward to being able to introduce you to this topic, recognizing that it is just that, an introduction. And of course, just like any counseling skills, it requires more. And so we hope that you'll take this and dive in and look at other opportunities for further expanding your awareness, knowledge, and skill with regard to the transgender population.
All right, before we get started, standing here before you, I'm a cisgendered adult white male, and I'm going to walk you through and I identify as pansexual, so I'm going to walk you through a little presentation, a little start-off activity, just to kind of immerse you in this world we're about to explore together, okay? So what I would like you to do, each of you select one of those colored stars on the table. And if you, just one, and if you don't have a star left, please raise your hand, and we'll make sure everyone gets a star. All right. We have one star over here. All right, for the rest of you, take your star, place it in front of you, and take out a pen or pencil. All right, now pay close attention as I read through this. This is actually a very, I'm gonna crack up, not crack up, but I'm gonna get fairly emotional reading this because even though I've done it many times, it's still pretty impactful. All right. Imagine this star represents your world, with you in the center, and those things or people most important to you at each point of the star. We begin by writing your name in the center of the star to make it your very own. Now, starting with one of the points, think of a specific family member, someone you have always turned to for advice, or maybe who knows how to cheer you up when you're sad. A mother, a father, aunt, or grandparent, any family member who has made a large impact in your life. Please write their name on the point of the star you've chosen. Huh? No, it's someone you currently turn to. Yes, they can be your husband. All right. Next, think of a community you belong to. It could be a faith community, your neighborhood organization, student group, or just a group of friends. Take the name of that group you're a part of and write that name on the next point of the star. Sure. Think of a community that you belong to. Think of a community you belong to. It could be a faith community, your neighborhood organization, a student group, or just a group of friends. And then write that name on the point of the star. All right, next. What job would you most like to have? It could be anything from president to dentist to actor or your current profession. Whatever your career aspiration is, please write it on the next point. All right. Now choose a friend who is very close to you, someone you care about very much, a best friend, a close friend, it doesn't matter. Write that name on the next point of the star. And lastly, what are some of your hopes and dreams? Maybe you want to be prosperous, start a family, travel the world, or give time to charitable causes. Think of a few hopes and dreams and write them down on the last point of the star. All right. Now, with the wave of my magic wand, each of you is now transgender, and you're about to begin your transition journey. You may not talk the rest of the activity. You decide that it will be easiest for you to come out to your friends first, since they have always been there for you in the past, and you feel they need to know. If you have a blue star, your friend has no problem with it. They have suspected it for some time, and thank you for being honest with them. Luckily, they act no differently towards you and accept you for who you are. If you have a green or yellow star, your friends are kind of hesitant. They are a little irritated that you have waited so long to tell them, but you are confident that soon they will understand that being transgender is just part of who you are. You just need to give them some time. Please fold the back of the point of the please fold the point to the back of the star. So just push the point back and fold it back on itself. That's just the green and yellow. All right. If you have a red star, you are met with anger and disgust. Your friend who has been at your side your whole life tells you that being transgender is wrong and they can't associate with anyone like you. If you have a red star, please tear off this point and drop it to the table or floor. This friend is no longer a part of your life. With most of you having such good luck with your friends, you decide that your family probably deserves to know. So you turn to your closest family member first, so they make it a little easier. If you have a yellow star, the conversation doesn't go exactly how you planned. Several questions were asked as to how this could have happened, but after some lengthy discussion, this person who is close to you seems a little more at ease with it. Fold this point of your star back, as they will be an ally, but only with time. Yellow star, please fold your point back. If you have a blue star, you are embraced by this family member. They are proud that you have decided to come out and let them know that they will always be there for you, to support you. Blue star, please leave your point intact. If you have a green or red star, your family member rejects the thought of being related to a person who is transgendered. Much like some of your friends, they are disgusted, and some of you are thrown out of your house or even disowned. You are now part of the 1/3 of homeless youth who are identified as LGBTQ. If you have a green or red star, please tear off this point and drop it to the table or floor. Having told your friends and family, the wheels have started to turn, and soon members of your community begin to become aware of your gender identity. If you have a yellow or blue star, your new gender identity is accepted by your community. They continue to embrace you like anyone else, and together you celebrate the growing diversity in your community. Yellow or blue, please leave your point intact. If you have a green star, you are met with a mixed response. Some accept you, and some don't know what to think. You remain a part of the community, and with time, you fit in as you once did. If you have a green star, please fold this point back. If you have a red star, your community reacts with hatred. They tell you that someone like you doesn't belong in their community. Those who had supported you in times of need no longer speak to you or acknowledge you. If you have a red star, tear this point off and drop it to the table or floor. You have heard the rumors that have started circulating at work regarding your gender identity. In the past, you have made it a point to confront these rumors as soon as they began, but now you're not sure if that would do more harm than good. But unfortunately, you don't have a chance. If you have a blue star, your coworkers begin to approach you and let you know that they've heard the rumors, but they don't care. They will support you. Your bosses react the same way, letting you know that you do good work and that's all that matters. If you have a yellow star, your workplace has become quite interesting. Everyone seems to not know what to make of the rumors surrounding your new identity. Some people speak to you less, but the environment has not seemed to change too drastically. If you have a yellow star, please fold this point back. If you have a red or green star, you continue to work as though nothing has happened, ignoring the rumors that have spread throughout the workplace. One day you come in and find your office has been packed up. You are called into your boss's office, and they explain to you that you are being fired. When you ask why, they tell you that lately your work has been less than satisfactory and that they had to make some cutbacks in your area. If you have a red or green star, please tear off this point and let it drop to the table or floor. Now, your future lies ahead of you as a trans person. Your hopes and dreams, your wishes for the perfect life, for some of you, these are all that remained. If you have a yellow, blue, or green star, these hopes and dreams are what have kept you going. Most of you have been met with some sort of rejection since the beginning of your coming out process, but you have managed to continue to live a happy and healthy life. Your personal hopes and dreams become a reality. If you have a red star, you fall into despair. You have been met with rejection after rejection, and you find it impossible to accomplish your lifelong goals without the support and love of your friends and family. You become depressed, and with nowhere else to turn, many of you abuse drugs or alcohol. You have thoughts that you feel that your life no longer is worth living. If you have a red star, please tear it up and drop the pieces to the floor. You are now aware of why 1 out of 3 transgender youth attempt suicide. Now it's your turn. What are some of your reactions to this exercise?
Well, first of all, I was sitting here with chills when I was filling this out because I was thinking how blessed I was to be able to fill this out and really feel so blessed. My book club was reading a book called Transgender Radio by Crystal Alien. My book club, I was feeling so blessed when I was filling this out because of what I do have in my life. And then it started, I was a red, by the way, and my book club just finished reading a book called Transgender Radio by Chris Bohalian, which talks about someone becoming trans, and I've also personally worked with the parents of 2 people who have become trans. And as I was doing this, I realized it's not a joke. It's not a joke at all.
So I'm hearing, not only did you have a physical reaction, but it made you reflect back on your personal privilege. Yeah. Who else had their hand up? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I had the blue, so I was intact, but it actually, working with trans individuals over the years, it made me really sad, like I teared up, I just couldn't imagine, even with them telling me their stories, and I work with the Department of Corrections, and they're not always friendly when it comes to anything that's outside the box. Not the agency, let me take that back, not the agency, but just some of the people I work with. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Do I need to repeat all that? No, okay. And one of the things now is with getting urine screens and just the pushback with, oh my gosh, if they identify as a female and want to be observed by a female, the staff's reaction to, oh, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you respect somebody? But it was sad.
Yes, ma'am.
It made me think of the boy from Gloucester who took the school to court so that he could use the restroom that he identifies with. And honestly, even my husband couldn't understand why that was important and why he should be allowed. And I tried to explain to him, who's going to know? If you're out on the street and there's a woman that goes into the ladies' room, are you going to know that that's originally or physically, sorry, wrong term, but anyway, physically a man? You're not going to know. You're not going to care. So why should you care if he's in school? And he is believing she said she. What difference does it make?
Thank you. And you brought up an awesome point that I want to declare right now. For the duration of this seminar, let's declare this a safe space and give ourselves license and permission to make mistakes, to speak up, and don't let the notion that I don't want to offend or say the wrong thing get in the way of asking the hard questions, get in the way of clarifying what's going on. Because without you giving us feedback of where you're at, we can't meet you there and help you along the way. So for the next 2 hours, there will be absolutely zero judgment, retribution of any kind for any misspeak. This is a time to just let it out and ask the questions. Yes.
Hi. As I was filling out my star, I was green, so I was left intact with 1 point on my star. But as I was filling it out, I was thinking about the population that we work with, which is the intellectually disabled and developmentally disabled population. And they would have a hard time even coming up with some of these points. And the family star quite often is confused or stressed or already at the end of their rope anyway, just from having a lifelong responsibility of dealing with somebody who is not a typically developing individual. And so, if you throw intellectual disabilities or medical issues or developmental disabilities into this mix, it's even more complex. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much. Real quick, we're going to wrap it up real quick. Red stars, please raise your hand. During this little exercise, it didn't take you long to figure out that, here we go again. I mean, it became almost accepting or expecting this is going to happen. This population has lived their whole life that way. So keep that in mind as we move forward. The expectation that it's going to be that way for the rest of my life is what we're dealing with. So I'm sorry, please keep your questions to the end if you'd like to further discuss this, but we're going to get started on our presentation.
And this activity really highlights the need for developing awareness, knowledge, and skill with regard to the transgender population. We invite you to carry that level of empathy and sense of awareness or connection through that activity into the rest of this presentation, and really challenge you to recall when you all have learned about privilege and marginalization, that it can be really difficult in holding positions of privilege to really understand or connect with or feel empathy toward those who face marginalization and barriers daily. But we also all hold, most of us for the most part, some areas of privilege and marginalization. And so tap into that experience of what it's like to be marginalized so that you can have some empathy and connection with the transgender population, who at this point is the most discriminated against, most overtly in this society today. And so our objectives for the day, we want to introduce you to some terminology. We want to provide you with a bit of history and statistics. We want to talk about the mental health experiences of the transgender population, provide some interventions and strategies, as well as some resources. And of course, we'll be doing a couple of more activities along the way too. And you know, when we look at this, so many people confuse sexuality and gender identity. We're going to start by showing how they are distinct. We certainly can recognize that there's overlap. Both sexual identity and gender identity fall on a continuum and may not be set at any one point in an individual's life. Just as many of our identities evolve, and we'll be presenting an identity development model specific to transgender populations as well. But for further clarity, we're going to define these 6 dimensions for you.
All right, we're going to break down the first 2 identities here. Biological sex and gender identity. For many of us, if you didn't even think about it, you would think they were synonymous. Biological sex is sex you're assigned with birth. You know, what parts did you come with? Male, female, or what society's predominantly used to or identify with. However, intersex exists, and it exists at a much more frequent rate than you may have imagined. It's 1.7% of the population, which is very close to the redhead population. So intersex, I mean, I'm sorry to put it in terms that you might be able to comprehend. Intersex is someone born with both the parts of both genders. And at that time, a decision is made by the doctor, by the parents, which direction to go. Without the knowledge of the gender identity of the individual. So you can see how setting a course in one direction or the other could cause problems in the future. And just of note, there is more modern approaches where the doctor and parents would have a conference and decide to refrain from assigning a gender role until the child themselves further develops, ages 5, 6, 7, or 8. So a gender-neutral name would be chosen, and the parents would be more able to meet the child's needs as they develop. Gender identity, how I feel, my sense of self. You know, do I feel male on the inside, female, or a combination of the two? Myself, so where I would fit on this, biologically, I was born with male parts. My gender identity, on the inside, I have a sense of being a male individual. Is that, I see a lot of heads nodding. Okay, you're keeping up with me there. All right, gender expression. So let's take this a little deeper. Sure. Okay.
How does that person, is there any marker to identify that person?
Okay, we have a question in the back here. Is there some kind of marker to identify the person? How do I get some definitive data? Well, we just started off saying we exist on a continuum. And that's what I subscribe to, and I believe that. And no one's clearly pegged one way or the other. You exist somewhere on that continuum. So to answer your first question on the first slide, my sense of self, where I feel, that's going to be subjective to my experience of the world. So there's not going to be a lab result for that, how my sense of self. Here on gender expression, how I communicate my gender, my appearances, how I look, how do I express myself to the outside world, where right now I'm expressing a more masculine look, maybe a pro-masculine golfer look. But my expression could vary. I could express the more feminine or an androgynous look where neither side is represented. My sexual orientation, who am I attracted to emotionally, physically, and how I express that attraction. Again, either side of the spectrum. You know, am I attracted to the men, women, or both? You saw in the beginning I identify myself as pansexual. That would include the whole spectrum. That's what I find myself attracted to. That is not to be confused with my sexual behavior, what I do. Heterosexual, gay and lesbian are what we're most familiar with, but bisexuality exists in between. Myself currently being in a heterosexual marriage, I may be pansexual, but my sexual behavior is heterosexual at this time because I'm in a heterosexual relationship. For a long time, yes, for a long time. For the rest of my life. My sexual identity, my sense of sex as a sexual being. Heterosexual, gay and lesbian. Pansexual and bisexuality, or asexual, meaning not having a sexual marker identifier, not having an attraction, exists. Yes, sir.
On the slide, bisexual/pansexual, are they interchangeable terms?
Great question. And for some, they are. Bisexual kind of denotes one or the other. I'm either attracted to, denotes both, one or the other. But the spectrum that exists between there, whether it be transgendered personnel, gender fluid, people who bounce between genders, pansexual is more inclusive of the whole spectrum.
So, like, it could be that an individual identifies as pansexual, and it's about the attraction to a human. It's not, I'm attracted to both males and females. I'm attracted to anybody based on things that draw me to that person. So I'm attracted to transgender individuals in addition to males and females and people who are super intellectual. And there's lots of different ways that we can define attraction. And pan means across all. I don't put limits on it. Where bisexual is male and female.
Is asexual lack of attraction?
Yeah, it's lack of a sexual draw toward other humans.
It's not lack of sexual behavior, it's lack of a sexual drive?
Well, it also would really cover both in many ways. Because
it's not celibacy.
No,
No.
it's not separate. It's what is your attraction. Yes. For a little backstory on me, growing up, and being pansexual, having a military background, there was a lot of lack of acknowledging certain emotions, certain feelings growing up. There was a lot of trying to explain it away. I remember distinctly trying to express it to close friends without telling them too much, that I truly felt I would fall in love with the person's mind, with an individual. It didn't matter. I was trying to, like in my own coded language, trying to express to them that I was having these feelings that were across the board, that I really felt that soulmates could be anybody. It could be any two people if they correctly aligned. And that was me trying to make sense of where I was growing up. My small town was 89 people in my town. And 10 of them were in my family. So, it was... Yeah, so it was a long journey to come to realize what was going on inside me. Okay, so those six dimensions, guys, we're going to come back and recap on that and touch on them because you could see there's a lot going on, and there's a lot that can be incongruent, causing stressors, where I could fully label myself, no, I'm heterosexual, but my behaviors doesn't fall under that, but I swear I'm heterosexual. You can see how the incongruencies will cause stress. And there's a lot more just going on than just gay or straight.
And you'll hear frequently from us that gender identity does not imply information about sexual identity. We so often interweave the two of those and assume that somebody who is expressing themselves in a somewhat effeminate way must be gay. And that's not the case necessarily. And we need to start as helping professionals recognizing that and being able to separate out the two so that we can explore both arenas with our clients and not make those assumptions that they go together. And just as a basic overview of some of the terminology, One is considered cisgender when their sex assigned at birth is aligned with how they feel. So I am cisgender because I was born with female parts and I feel female. Versus transgender, which is when those two are out of alignment. What you're born with, your sex parts, are out of line with how you feel and identify. And there are lots of terms that actually go along with that because it isn't a simple identity. There are many ways within that realm, outside of cisgender, for individuals to exist.
Some more basic terminology. You will often hear FTM, MTF. That's, I don't want to say it's code, but it's often used in the community for a female to male transition or a male to female transition. So, someone may identify as an FTM. They started off as a female and they have successfully transitioned to male. Here are some popular identities that have made the news, made the media, that we're familiar with.
And the FTM and MTF is the one we're most familiar with. That's when we think of transgender individuals, we often think, oh, they must be FTM or MTF. We also want to present the broader definitions.
Yes, the point A to point B is how we kind of conceptualize transgender, like that's where you're going from one sex to another. That's not necessarily true. In between there is not only the journey, but there's many places that you would just exist. Gender fluid implies crossing back and forth and not ever arriving at a destination and staying there. Gender nonconforming, meaning that I don't want to identify with either. I like the middle ground, and that's where I am. In fact, this concept is often embraced by other cultures. Having the essence of both male and female in one is honored, revered, looked on as an asset to the community. The third gender is used in India. Two-spirited. First Nations people have reclaimed that as part of their community. It is not always looked at as an oddity, but is looked at as, wow, this person is so special. We're so privileged to have this in part of our system.
And that is uniquely wonderful and pretty counter to our Western society. We've introduced you to some definitions and some ideas about how individuals come to develop an identity, and some of the language used to define that for them, which is also important to acknowledge that these are also socially constructed understandings and terminologies. So we are in a place in our society today where there are labels people can adopt that can ultimately be very liberating for people. Pansexual, for example, is a newer term. And so individuals who were open to connecting with any human would be forced to call themselves bisexual, even though that really didn't encompass their entire identity. So as we evolve in our understanding, we create language associated that then can be adopted by individuals and help them to feel more accurately identified. But with that, we also have to be aware of the ways in which we're engaging. Workshops like this are really important so that you become more sensitive and skilled and aware of the impact of your interactions. It is very easy for general people, but also counselors and mental health professionals to engage in microaggressions unintentionally. We talked about this a lot for those of you that attended our diversity presentation in general, but the microaggressions can be really harmful for clients. And there's lots of ways we can do that by our body language, our nonverbals, and also some of the more overt things that we choose to say. Things like, what's your real name? And you might think that that's an appropriate thing to ask, particularly at a treatment center or something. But when somebody is asked that over and over again, it's minimizing their reality and who they really are. And so it is perfectly appropriate to ask questions, but that those questions should come from a space of already having some awareness and knowledge about the population so that you don't inadvertently end up engaging in these microaggressions.
Just further touch on that. I mean, we're talking about broaching in that. You know, we're talking about who is the expert in the room. Yes, you guys have come to the seminar, but that doesn't make you the expert in the room. The client is the expert in the room when talking about that. What I like to refer to, and this is funny, who's the best broacher in the world? The best broacher in the world is going to be like the 2 or 3 year old who walks up and asks the handicapped person, "Why are you in the chair?" No one gets upset about that because it comes from a place of just authentic wanting to know question. You know, and as a therapist, if we come to our client and we just, from an authentic place, you're the expert, please help me understand your point of view, your concept of being you, broaching becomes much easier. I mean, and it is accepted much more readily. So be mindful of the language you use. If you go back one slide real quick, every one of these examples makes an assumption that can be potentially damaging. Every one of them, I'm assuming, oh, you must want the surgery. You know, I'm making an assumption that I had no right to make in that. The client is the expert. They're going to let me know what's going on. Okay, so real quick, some vocabulary words here. I talked about pronouns. You saw when I introduced myself, I said my name is Tony. My pronouns are he, him, and his. What did I do just then? I mean, that's how I start every class, every lecture, when I'm meeting someone for an online course. I throw that out there. That's just part of my introduction. Now, to someone who doesn't know what's going on in the world, they hear that and they go, that's strange. But for someone who it matters and means a lot, I'm sending a big signal flare up in the sky saying, this person's aware of something that most people are not. Or if I'm sitting down with a client that's I'm a little thrown by their appearance or I'm not quite sure what to make, I can open my session with, my pronouns are he, him, and his, and I've instantly let down one potential wall that may exist in that room for open dialogue. It's an easy thing to do. Yes, ma'am.
And I just don't understand. This is going to, I don't know what it's going to sound like. I'm just really confused. The need for the pronouns. It's ignorance, but I don't understand.
Great. No, perfect question to ask. Perfect question. And that's why we have this slide.
It's interesting. I had this conversation with my daughter last night, who is a high school teacher who runs into this kind of issue all the time. And she was telling me that a student came into her class who was in process, and she kept using the wrong pronoun because she would look at what appeared to be a male that wanted to be identified as a female, and she would say he or that kind of thing. And she said, I'd catch myself or my other students would catch me, and I decided to take him aside, her aside, I don't know which way it was going, and say, look, I'm just not used to this, and they come out by accident. I don't mean anything by it. Will you forgive me for doing that? And will you forgive me for any mistakes I make? I really am trying to get hold of this and do it the right way. So the pronouns are important not only for this. Yeah. I think pronouns are a problem in a lot of areas. So pronouns are hard to deal with.
It's not, I get when somebody's transitioning. That one I get completely. It's the they.
I have clients who are using the they, them, their, and who are not transitioning, but have chosen the they, them, their I don't understand that. And I'm trying to figure out, in my mind, why.
Okay. Oh, sure.
Oh, my question is basically, I'm seeing a couple now, a female couple, and there is a difference. You can see the male in the picture, even though she still is female, and I get confused. Do I need to go now and ask them their pronouns?
Yeah. Who's the expert in the room? It's there. How would you like to be referred to? Where are your? Remember, in the client therapist relationship, the object is to break down walls, not pass judgment, unconditional positive regard. Where are you at? So I may meet you there. How would you like me to address you?
Because don't we do that with our other clients? I know when I have a Latino family sitting in front of me, I don't assume they want to be called Latino or Hispanic or Puerto Rican, or I ask them, how do you identify? This is broaching at its best. And why would somebody want to go by they, them, there? If that possibly people who are FTM or MTF are more likely to select she, her, hers, or he, him, his. But if I fall on that gender continuum and I consider myself gender fluid, I don't want to adopt a masculine term or a feminine term. I want to select something that covers everything. So I'm going to go by they, them, and their, or one of the others that's even less attached to any of our conventional ways of identifying. Because how language evolves, and it comes with assumptions. So when I say, she or he, then that is packaged with all types of understanding of what she's and he's are all about. And that might not necessarily be who I see myself as, so I depart from that. And it's not my place as a therapist to dump my assumption of what they should be called on them. That's where they're the expert. And it's so valuable to just simply ask, what are your pronouns? And then go with it. It's not your place, just like it isn't with any underrepresented, marginalized population, to change them from the way that they see themselves. It's your job to support and meet them where they are and work within their frame of reference, whatever that might be.
I appreciate that because it was given to me by the client, and I went with it, but I had no idea what it was.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so real quick on that. I mean, just personally, I'm seeing these alternate pronouns pop up more and more. And when I encounter one, I'm just going to be honest. Inside, I go, ooh, a little excited. Because, to me, it's like, there's more to the story. I can't wait for our relationship to develop further so I can understand more. And so I do get a little excited when I do hear them or see them prop up in media or read about them. I mean, your guys are going to run into them more often. Okay, brace yourself. What I want you to do right now is a really quick exercise. I want you to turn to the person to your right or left, and I want to practice your introductions using your own preferred pronouns. My name is Tony. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Just back and forth. Practice your introduction. Because the reason I say this is because you don't want the first time you're doing this to be with the client because it's going to sound uncomfortable because just like broaching, you haven't practiced. So turn to your right and to your left and practice those introductions for a few minutes.
Okay, let's wrap it up. And just like any new skill, it can be uncomfortable at first. Just like when you were beginning counseling student or social work student or human services student and learning how to reflect a feeling was hard. Learning how to use silence was hard. This is another skill that allows you to connect and feel, to show some awareness and knowledge. And so it's worth practicing. Practice until it does feel comfortable.
I just want to know, how do you pronounce the bottom three? The Z's and the E's.
That's pretty much how you do it. Yes, it's Z, zer, and zem, and Z, her, and hers, and I, er, and M. And even in the show Billions, if anybody watches that, one of the top financial traders goes by they, them, and their. And it's neat because that's probably one of the very first kind of broadly advertised shows that it illustrates somebody who chooses to utilize pronouns differently than the norm. And they do it in a pretty sensitive way, which is pretty surprising. Yes?
So how do you handle it if you say that to a client and they have no idea what you're talking about and they ask you if you give them your pronouns?
Let them ask. You know, it's almost like, again, this isn't some completely separate culture, apart from the strategies and skills that would work with any culture. And so if a client asks, then help them understand that you are committed to cultural sensitivity and that however you define, that you choose to be inclusive. I do that often rather than saying, particularly before the equal marriage laws were in place, I always called Tony my partner because I wanted to show that I was aware that not everybody had the opportunity to get married and have a husband or a wife. Now that individuals are, I'm more comfortable saying that to show, you know, some sense of awareness. And so in some ways it's similar, that you would utilize that as a way to show a connection and an understanding.
Yes, ma'am.
Pronouns are a preference. There's not necessarily an assigned correct pronoun group.
There's no pronoun police.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And this next slide really relates to what you and I were talking about at the beginning of before the presentation started. For those of you, again, who attended our last, workshop on cultural sensitivity in general, we spent a lot of time on intersectionality. And just like then, for those who identify as transgender, that's only one part of who they are. So we have to be careful about not simply responding to what we assume to be the issue. You know, it's like, just like with any other culturally underrepresented population. If I have an African American female walk into my office, I don't go, oh, every issue that she's going to be presenting to me is about her race in this society. There's probably parts of that will emerge if I'm sensitive and open to hearing that, because we are intersecting identities. We exist of a multitude of different identities. And so looking at how they intersect, particularly those underrepresented or the marginalized identities. When you have multiple marginalized identities, the experience in society is usually far more challenging. And so we highlight this again to ward you against just assuming that the transgender client is there, that's all they're there to address, and also to invite you to remember when you're working with a transgender client, and really any client, that client exists of multiple identities, and to examine how those interact to create that client's lived experience.
All right, definitions. especially for those of you who are here during our last seminar, we talked a lot about heterosexual privilege. What I am handing out here today is going to help you understand cisgendered privilege. All right, there we go. Cisgendered privilege. A set of unearned advantages that individuals who identify as the gender they are assigned at birth occur solely to having a cisgendered identity. So that handout you're coming around to you today, what I'm going to ask what you guys to do you guys have one? All right. Is you're going to turn to the person to the right and left of you, and you're going to alternate reading one line back and forth, one example back and forth, and then at the end of when you make your way through the list, I want you guys to share which one of these statements impacted you the greatest. Which ones were you not aware of or hadn't considered? Remember, this is the unearned privilege of simply being born with the parts you feel you should have. It may be a privilege you never knew you had or never thought really mattered that much. All right, so take a moment amongst yourselves and read them back and forth, the people across from you. All right, we're going to wrap it up now, guys. If I can get your attention back up here. Can I get your attention up here, guys? Were there anybody who had have a more of a sense of awareness now? Did any one of these pop out to you? Raise your hand and share it with us.
The last one, actually. At my funeral, it is unlikely that my family would present me cross-dressed against my living wishes. So what this is saying is when I die, if I'm transgender and I'm a female to male, they're going to dress me in a dress. Is that what this is saying? My family will dress me in a dress?
This is saying your family did not respect the way you lived and chose to dress you the way they wished you were.
That's
Mm-hmm. Powerful. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The question was, can you explain experiencing puberty more than once? Yes. When you go on hormone therapy, you are experiencing puberty again. So everything that comes along with that. So, anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I think the airline one where you're taken aside and searched, or additional searches by airport security. I find those just inflammatory to start with, let alone if I were transgender.
Mm-hmm. The additional levels of, yes. Yes, sir.
Right. 17. Right. I have a better chance of reaching my old age without taking my own life. One of the things that has been powerful for me listening to the presentation so far is, as I'm kind of feeling myself into what this must be like, is the incredible loneliness. You know, the isolation, the sense that every day is a struggle and a challenge just to figure out, where do I belong? Whereas for most of us, that's just a given.
Thank you.
I even think that number 5 is disturbing. I constantly am filling out forms. We've got 5 children. I'm filling out forms constantly for them. And I'm always so disappointed when a form just has male, female. Now, you are seeing some evolution in that. There are some forms that will maybe say other, or they'll just have a blank that says to fill in your gender, or they'll have some options. But for the most part, the predominant process is to still just have male, female, and it makes me cringe every time. And I can't imagine if who I am isn't represented on a form that might really be impacting my experience of something. So even that is something that would be like a daily microaggression.
And you did hear correctly. She said 5 children. 2 girls and 3 boys.
They're adopted.
Well, I think one of the hardest ones would be to go to the bathroom or change in the gym. I don't know about y'all, but if I have to go into a public area, a public bathroom, a public gym, I want to get in and get out. It's not to hang out there. So when I see somebody have a hard time with a transgender person going to the bathroom, I think about it, it's like, look, it's a basic need we all have to do. People want to get in and get out. They're not in there to lurk and linger and to be equated to a pedophile. That's one of the things that really sticks in my craw, is if you just want to go into the bathroom because you want to attack my little boy or attack my little girl.
Not just that, guys, how many people get creeped out going to a public restroom to begin with? Okay, now take that, but in addition to that, add to it, it may be a life and death experience. You have to consider that there is an added level of threat. I mean, every little thing that you take for granted has to be looked at through a different lens, that this could affect me physically emotionally, mentally. I mean, it's an entirely different lens to look through and to a whole different level. We're going to actually take a quick break, guys. I mean, I'm sure you need it.
As quick as you can, because we want to be able to get through the whole presentation.
So can we be back in your seats in 5 minutes? Can we do that? All right.
Run.
Thank you.
Run to that bathroom.
Remember, it's a public restroom.
Okay, so we are going to dive right in so that we can get to the fun stuff. We've talked about a bunch of different terminologies and ways to understand who your client is, basically by asking them to share that and define it for themselves. The experience of privilege and marginalization that is experienced by so many who identify as transgender. And we're going to shift into looking at some of the history and the data that's associated. Clearly, how society perceives and embraces or not has a great impact on the experience of any marginalized population. We are seeing some advancements societally and with regard to those who identify as transgender. Even in our more recent elections, we have individuals who are transgender serving in some pretty important political areas. I'm very proud of our very own Danica Rome. And there's also been a lot of discussion at the state and federal levels. In October of 2009, under Obama, it was a federal crime to assault an individual because of his or her sexual orientation or gender identity. And that was a good stride forward. Since, we've taken some slides back, unfortunately, with President Trump tweets about banning transgender troops. We have in 2018, the Department of Health and Human Services having a Conscious and Religious Freedom Act, so they don't have to see clients if it's against their religion, which can be very difficult when it comes to both sexual orientation minority individuals, as well as transgender populations. And then, there are 20 states who have employment and non-discrimination laws, but we have 50 states in this country. So that's a lot that still actually have discrimination is acceptable. You can fire somebody for being transgender. You don't have to say, oh, we're cutting back, because of cost. You can say, I'm uncomfortable having you work here as a transgender, you're fired. And really, it's similar for sexual orientation. We haven't made those strides yet. And same with 13 states and DC do have legal protections for students, but when we have 50 states, that's just not enough.
Let me throw something out here too, guys. July 2017, Trump throwing out his tweet, and you're like, why is this tweet up there? How many people are military, prior military in the room? All right, thank you for your service. Myself, I served the Navy and SEAL teams for 6 years before getting injured. And so during that time, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in effect. Pretty much what that basically means is the command kind of set the tone to what level you're going to operate at. And so I remember having a CO who would make politically incorrect jokes and some certain statements, and that kind of just set the tone of how we interacted with each other. When the commander-in-chief sets the tone of how we interact with each other, that trickles down, and that gives licensure to overtly make comments and overtly offend and overtly exclude or beat up. I mean, unfortunately, just something small like that, it's a tweet. Yeah, who gives a... Well, yeah, but the commander-in-chief made a tweet. I mean, my experience in the military, that's how we operate. It's a trickle down. The CEO says something, that means it's okay for me to act that way. So it does make a difference. And from personal experience being in the military during that time, it has consequences.
So, you want to go next?
Oh, sure.
Where do we stand in the state?
Where does Virginia stand? where do we break down? This is a slide that I use in my LGBTQ presentation because it contains a lot of both sexual identity, but more specifically gender identity. Same gender marriage, legal. Changing gender, legal but requires a surgery in Virginia. That's still huge. You have to go and complete the surgery to legally change your gender in the state of Virginia. What else do we have up here? We have the discrimination, no protections. There is no law offering blanket protection on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. Both are lacking in Virginia. Housing discrimination, no protections. Employment discrimination, no protections. It means that for the reason of your gender identity, you can be asked to leave. There's no legal ramifications for the employer or for the housing. So those are still lacking in Virginia.
And of course, when you see how laws and policies are established, all of that has an impact on the experience of the individuals. And so this moves us into looking at some of those statistics about experience. You read the first one, at least one transgender person is murdered every month in the US. That's actually a huge percentage, and it's the equivalent to 1,400 cisgender individuals dying each month. That's the equivalent. That's alarming. It's another one that jumps out. 40% of transgender adults are reported having made a suicide attempt. 50% of transgender youth have seriously thought about suicide. And this is 25 times the rate of the general population. Really alarming. 33% of transgender youth report having made a suicide attempt. And even the one, I know I'm virtually covering all of them because they're just so shocking, but 74% of transgender youth report being sexually harassed at school. 74%. That is insane when you think about how many kids that is. So you recognize that this is what impacts difficulty and challenge as much, if not more, than the process of transitioning. And the process of becoming and adopting an identity. These types of issues are what you will likely see as a helper. And some of those needs are highlighted here. It is very likely that individuals, when you saw those statistics, they're going to be discriminated against. And we know the implications of discrimination, both overt and covert discrimination, very harmful. And so it's likely you're going to see clients expressing that. This marginalized population receives the highest degree of hate crimes among any marginalized population. That is impactful. School and workplace issues, I mean, clearly facilities issues are at the forefront. I mean, we're hearing that, talking about that, seeing that in the news. But it also is around just job issues in general. If I've been at a place for a long time and I determine that I'm at a point where I want to actually transition, how do I manage that on the job? Or even just looking at career options post-transition. There's lots. Career counseling is actually a really big area for individuals who are transgender when it comes to mental health arena. Language, we talked about that, reactions to people who are insensitive around their language, but also how I, as a transgender individual, are going to adopt and shift myself. How do I define myself? And so looking at the language, helping individuals who might have only also heard of gay and lesbian and female to male, male to female. Give them the language to help them find what fits them. Relationship dynamics, I mean, clearly relationships are a challenge. For many marginalized populations, the individuals can learn to navigate society through role models within their own homes. If I am an Asian female that has biological parents who are Asian, I can go to my mom and learn how to exist in this society and how to face those marginalizations that are part of being an underrepresented population. But for somebody who's transgender, that is far less likely. And so the family dynamics are going to be tremendous. And for those of you that work in residential treatment, that you might have access to families or family therapists out here might have access to be able to work with families. And being able to normalize some of the experience of grief and that sort of thing is important, as well as helping families become more accepting, because support is critical for anybody, but particularly for the challenges that those who are transgender face in society. And then the transition piece. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. All right, the transition piece. We want to just take what we think we know about transition. It isn't, like I said before, point A to point B. That's the journey. Here we go. It's not. Transition could be a point anywhere in between on that spectrum. It's not all people are going to want hormones. Not all people are going to want the surgery. That isn't, we can't make these assumptions that that's the end result. It may include, but doesn't have to, any one of these. This isn't, it may look like it's listed sequentially, but it doesn't have to be. The middle space that exists there can be any combination of things. It could be both all male parts, all female parts, half male, half female. It could be anywhere along the spectrum in between, and that is okay. This doesn't always have to follow this order, but this is one order that is looked at. Changing one's name, dressing differently, grooming differently, taking hormones, surgery, legally changing their gender and identity. But understand that it's any point in between the two can be a natural stopping place, a place of existing happily. Also, bear in mind that on the spectrum from if you're MTF, male to female, on either end, there tend to be less social challenges, because once you make the transition, and if you're successfully passing, there are less social challenges at one end once you assimilate into your system. But in between is where you're going to see a lot of the pushback, the resistance, the challenges. I saw a question.
Can you legally change your gender without the surgery?
Not in the state of Virginia.
Some states, yes, but not Virginia.
Some states. All right, history of transgender. The treatment, gosh, the way we've looked at it, the way we've seen this as, is it a problem? Is it something? What is it? The DSM-4 has looked at it, gender identity disorder. That's how we first dealt with it. It is, it's been pathologized, it's been looked at as something's wrong. We need to treat this. Initially, there was some split reviews of some people were happy it was in there, because now people could get insurance to cover surgeries, operation, treatment. Others were like, no, appalled by it. No, we can't look at it as something that's wrong. We can't give it a sense that this person has something defective about them. When the DSM-5 came along, they looked at this new term came out, gender dysphoria. Again, it was looked at as a temporary condition, something that's, yes, there's going to be additional stressors with the transition. It's something that can be dealt with. Many people saw this as an adequate solution. We can still get the help we need. We can still assign a code where we can collect insurance as a happy medium. Still, others still look at it as, no, you're still pathologizing. You're still looking at it as something that's wrong. It's a natural part of the process. So there's still some debate whether or not this is where it's going to end. Any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
using it to broaden up to ask questions, to get information, and
Okay, so I think I'm getting this right. You're referencing the letter that's required for a transition. And gosh, we're going to talk more about this. Is it this slide? We're talking about the letter that someone transgender has to go into treatment and receive therapy. And it's taking more of an approach of we're here to assist, we're here to educate, to help you, move you along, and not to judge. You're not trying to prove to me, you have to get my blessing to do this. So it's about taking that approach to this letter. You're not here trying to prove that you're worthy, and I'm not here to grant you permission. But the approach coming from a place of, let me assist you, and this is going to be challenging, no doubt about it. What can I do? What resources can I connect you to? It's more about preparing the individual for the process. There is in Virginia a 6-month required therapy counseling before undergoing the surgery for transition. And so there needs to be a letter by a therapist written on behalf of the patient to allow for the surgery. The doctors require to allow for the surgery. So can you imagine going into that treatment session thinking I have to prove to this person that I need this surgery? And so we want to take the approach as you're not trying to get my permission for it. You want to come to them as this, I'm here to help you, support you for this upcoming event in your life.
Okay, so we're shifting and we have the background, some definitions. We have a little understanding of where we are as a society in reference to this population, and moving into how to then address those needs. There's a model, the transgender emergence model, that's really similar to CROSS's Black Identity Development Model or CAS's LGBT development model. This is a really valuable tool for your use as a practitioner to assess where your client is and shape your interventions based on where they are. It allows you to meet them and then gently challenge to the next level of identity development. And it moves from the first levels of awareness to reaching out and trying to information gather, to the disclosures, to exploring one's identity and labels, to exploring transition issues, to integration. And you're aware that in all of those other models, that integration level is the highest level. So you're hoping that your work with a client is going to move them toward that integration. And there's strategies for doing that. We've got the algebraic competencies for counseling transgender clients. Now, again, ACA has diversity competencies. There's multiple competencies out there. You may not be as aware that there are transgender competencies also. And these are really helpful. They focus on awareness, knowledge, and skill within each of those domains: human growth, social and cultural foundations, helping relationships, group work, professional orientation, career and lifestyle development, competencies, appraisal and research. So that can become a nice resource for you to refer to in your practice. And then probably most commonly used with this population is affirmative therapy. How many of you are familiar with affirmative therapy? Okay, there's a few. The cornerstone of affirmative therapy is in its name. It's being affirming, being a space, a safe space where an individual can express who they are and you affirm it. You don't challenge it, you don't react in disgust, you don't try to change them. You affirm and support. And recognizing that these individuals have likely experienced great mass quantities of discrimination outside of your counseling environment. The best approach you can use is to honor who they are and provide some affirmations. And this is just kind of bullet points drawn out from this therapeutic approach. But one of the most important things, and that we've talked about before, through broaching, get the person's narrative. They are the expert. Invite them to share who they are and what their experiences are. And you respond empathically and in an affirmative manner.
And remember the 6 dimensions we talked about starting off there. Each one of those can be explored with your client, and then for you, there's an understanding that whatever that combination is unique to them, and that's okay. We don't have to instantly say, wow, that doesn't make sense. If you feel like this, and you're doing this and this and this, that doesn't fit what I think is okay. There must be something wrong. But now you're aware that no, any one of those combinations, though some may have more challenges in today's life, is still okay and someone can exist in that space.
And in the earlier stages, resistance to accepting self is very common, which is very similar in the CASA's LGBT identity development. Just because your client says, I look like a man, I feel like a woman, but I hate that, I don't want to do this, I don't want to be a woman, that your role is to understand that that's a normal part of this identity development, and not say, okay, well then we'll just help you stay the way you are. That's fine. Just like you wouldn't say that to somebody who says, I think I'm attracted, I'm a female and I think I'm attracted to females, but I don't want to be. I'm married to a man, I don't want to be this way. Your response isn't, well, good, let me put you in reparative therapy. Our response is, of course this is difficult. Of course this is not something that is a comfortable shift. We live in a society where being open and honest about who you are when it diverts from the norm comes with great discrimination and challenge. So I understand that. You meet them where they are in that early developmental stage and help move them collaboratively toward those higher levels of acceptance. And that is a challenge. But we can't let our assumptions about it interfere, which is really that second bullet too. We might say, oh, wonderful, I'm so happy for you. Let's contact some doctors and get the hormone treatment therapy going. If your client's not ready for that, you don't want to push them in a manner that's uncomfortable either. Yes.
I just have a comment on what the lady said in the back about the letter, going back to the letter. That's no different than for me personally. I had weight loss surgery, and I had to go through a 6-month process also, because the therapist had to meet me and talk to me to make sure this is what I wanted. So me personally, as a therapist myself, I don't understand why a therapist would feel uncomfortable, because that's what her job is. Your job is to make sure that the person really wants this before, because again, just like weight loss surgery, just like your surgery, you can't reverse it. So you have to make sure that it's what you want, that the person wants.
Yeah. And I think that your points are really strong. And I think that what it comes down to is the manner in which that process unfolds. And you see in the bullet that says, for medical procedures, informed consent versus approval. And so if you're in a space as a counselor where you're like, oh, my job is to evaluate your mental health capacity, and if I say no, then you might as well forget about that surgery. That is such a different stance than, wow, help me understand where you're coming from. I'm curious to hear about your experience, and help me understand what this will look like post-surgery, and let's together gather information and do it in a collaborative way. That feels so different than this box is checked. I'm not sure about this box. We're going to need to work on that more. It's kind of that difference between evaluation and a shared collaborative process. And at the end, the letter still needs to be written, you know, but how you go about writing that letter can look very different depending on the lens you're using. And so affirmative therapy really pushes that it's a shared process, it's informed consent versus evaluative and approval-based, if that makes sense. And you know, we talked a bit about the families and the importance of helping families move from rejection or skepticism through the grief process, which is normal, to acceptance. We're going to share with you at the end of this presentation a whole list of resources. Resources are essential because we can't necessarily rely on families to be supportive, and so connecting transgender individuals with transgender communities is key. So knowing those is very important.
You touched on, you just went over the grief process. You know, what grief are we talking about in the family dynamic?
Can't hear you back here.
Oh.
Sorry. What grief are we talking about in the family dynamic in this process here? Losing a son or daughter. Yes. And that has to be addressed and dealt with. That becomes the elephant in the room. I mean, they don't want to offend by saying, oh, no, we've lost a son. They're not saying that person's dead, but they have lost a perceived member of that family in a way.
And recognizing those co-occurring problems. We see this with a lot of marginalized populations who experience daily discrimination, where the experience of all of that marginalization leads to unhealthy behaviors and ways in which to navigate the world. So substance abuse is disproportionately high within the transgender population. And again, though, as a therapist, you don't want to just address the substance abuse without understanding the intersecting variables of experience that are contributing. And likewise, you wouldn't want to just hone in on the transgender identity component and fail to address the co-occurring experiences that that individual is sharing. Yes?
Well, I'm thinking of the intersection of trauma-informed care.
Yes.
Because, I mean, all these things, great. All these things are, you know, it's traumatic. Afraid to go to the bathroom. Yeah. You know, just so much fear and so much trauma.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so, in an interdisciplinary approach, and that is more critical, I'd say, with this population than with many others, particularly for those who wish to engage in medical procedures. Don't assume that you know enough here. You reach out and utilize those other services and collaborate so that you can be a support while you're also understanding those medical procedures and getting informed by the medical practitioners, and you can really work then in a collaborative fashion.
All right, do's and don'ts. Guys, we're getting close to the end here, and as a quick recap, I'm just going to highlight some of the more important do's and don'ts before we jump into some little vignettes we have planned for you. All right, do support gender-inclusive spaces and practices. I know there's a monetary factor involved, but provide gender-neutral restrooms. Allow the individual to select a space of their choice. Ensure we do have control over our forms. I mean, go ahead and advocate for that. I mean, to you it may not seem like much, but to someone else it is. Why not have their very, very first experience of your agency be a positive one? Why does the very first question have to automatically be one more barrier? Do not disclose an agent's transgender status to anyone who doesn't explicitly need the information. Give it one extra level of reverence.
And we're familiar with this with many marginalized populations. Why isn't it the author, not that black author? You know, why is it that it's that president and instead we say that woman president? We use that a lot only for underrepresented and marginalized populations. So, don't feed into that. Oh, that new transgender patient that just checked in. That's inappropriate and unnecessary, and is a microaggression. It's kind of aggressive, but it's technically micro.
All right. Do you remain aware of federal, state, and institutional policies? Your institutional policy. Be aware of it. It does exist or doesn't exist, and that's the problem. There isn't one. Be aware, be proactive, look into it. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a situation to discover that your agency doesn't even have a policy. All right. Do not confuse gender identity with sexual orientation. We've been highlighting that all day today. Two separate things that exist independently of each other.
And one thing we didn't say related to that, and that confuses the heck out of my students, is that if I look like a woman on the outside, but I really identify as a man, and I am dating a woman, then I'm heterosexual. It doesn't matter that my body looks like a female. If I identify as a male and I like females, then I'm hetero. And so, and you can do all those combinations. Good. I'm glad it's not just my students. If I look like a female, but I feel like a man, I identify as a male, and I'm interested in you, then I'm a male interested in a female. I'm heterosexual. And conversely, I look like a female, I feel like a male, and I like males, then I'm gay. I'm a gay male. Even though if I was walking down the street with this gentleman, they would assume we're in a heterosexual relationship. Does that make sense? A little bit. I mean, it's confusing, but are you following it? Yes, and that's where it's that the sexual orientation and gender identity depart. Okay.
Thank you. Let's see. Do be aware of impact of intersecting identities. Do not assume transgender status means counseling is needed. We underscored that there are needs for surgery, but do not jump to the conclusion, oh, these people need a lot of help. Do know your limits. Seek consultation, refer if needed. What does that really means, guys? If you have, whether it be religious beliefs, moral beliefs, if something in you, and you can feel it, and you have to be honest with yourself, that's preventing you from providing the accurate, providing the authentic, the real relationship that needs to develop. If you know that about yourself, gosh, refer. I mean, there is a lacking in your part of the tools, I believe, required to do this job to the best of your ability. Okay, so that takes some internal fortitude to know that about yourself, that you can't go there with this client. So, I mean, and that's just be honest. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any statistics regarding individuals who have, who identify with these issues we're talking about, being victims as opposed to the aggressor in crimes? I know that with the ID and the DD population of people with mental illness, those individuals are more likely to be victims as opposed to the aggressor in a crime situation. But the perception of the society is that people with schizophrenia are going to kill everybody, or people who have lower intellect are going to be sexually promiscuous with your children. And that's not true. Those individuals are more likely to be a victim. Are there any statistics along those lines?
Yeah, that earlier slide had that 48% report being victims of assault, including assault with a weapon, sexual assault, or rape. The percentage far outreaches that of actually any other population in our society today.
I think I grasped what you were talking about.
Are there percentages of how many actually are the criminal or the aggressor?
Oh, gotcha.
Right, because you're saying there's a perception exists that the transgendered individual is going to be perpetrating a crime or committing something, wrong. And I bet you there is. I do not have a statistic. That would be an awesome slide to put up here. Thank you for that, and I'll make sure I get into our next presentation. Any other questions about the do's and don'ts before we move into the next phase of our development?
I have one quick question.
Yes.
When she was talking about the I feel like a woman situation, what about the partner? So what do they identify as? If you say you feel like a man, but you look like a female, but you're with a man, I'm homosexual, right? Is that what you're saying? So what is that partner? How is that partner's identity? Do they still look women because they're attracted to a woman and they're walking down the street with a woman, but the woman identifies as a man?
Yeah, and there's a lot of complexity within that.
A lot.
And having interactions with many transgender individuals, a lot of times it's common for a transgender individual to partner with somebody who is like pansexual. Okay. But it doesn't have to be. And yeah, those become things that are negotiated between the couple. Mm-hmm.
And my simple answer to that would be, how do you identify? So, yes. I mean, and there's going to be, gosh, you're going to see, I think I got this, I think I understand, and you'll sit down with someone who says something totally different, and you just go with that, because that's their reality, and we're entering into their world. So, all right. We'll come right back. All right. So our final 10 minutes, we're going to jump into it and get at least one of these vignettes in. All right, I'm going to read this out loud, guys, and then we're going to process this real quick, all right?
And what we want you to do is to consider the emergence model and do kind of a little assessment at what state would you place this individual, as well as applying some of the constructs from affirmative therapy.
All right, so I'll read this out loud, and then I'll flick back to the emergence model. All right. As my son would say, vinaigrette number 1. A new patient, Chris, confused about relationships, comes you to talk. You're uncomfortable because you can't immediately tell whether the patient is male or female, and you have no idea what kind of relationships the patient might be concerned about. You learn after a few minutes with Chris that Chris is biologically female and has never had a fulfilling relationship with a man. She expresses that she's actually more attracted to women than men. However, she does not see herself as lesbian because she feels more like a man. She wants to know if you can help her, or if you know anyone else who has confused feelings about their gender. Where would you start with this?
What are your pronouns?
What are your pronouns? Or start with your own. Hey, my name's Tony. He, him, and his. Where next?
Flip back to the emergence model, and how would you assess your client?
Back. Sorry, big butt.
There.
Big fingers, little buttons.
Tell me your story. Tell me more about your story.
Absolutely, and that would be kind of applying that first bullet under affirmative therapy. Because the best way you can help somebody is to understand where they're coming from. And that's going to be really for any client. This isn't departing that much. It's just being intentionally affirming of that story is aligned with the therapy. Where would you say, what state would you say this individual may fall into? It might be in between a couple. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awareness and seeking information, probably. Mm-hmm. Which is going to impact how you interact, because what you're going to do with somebody who's at the awareness and info gathering stage looks very different from somebody who's in the exploration transition issue stage, right?
Yeah, let's look at awareness real quick. How much awareness does this person have? Yes. Yep. They're aware that, there's some, they've obviously tried a number of relationships, trying to be fulfilling, trying to work it out. It seems like, just entering into this awareness, there's something else going on. Do you know anybody else like me? I mean, there's definitely the beginning of information gatherings there. Something's going on. I'm in therapy. They're seeking help looking for something else, looking for answers.
Anything else that stands out that you would want to try?
Subtle hint. Connecting with a support group, yes. What else do you think?
How about finding out about their current supports and their level of awareness and understanding of this individual's, I don't want to say confusion, but concerns.
Stress. Yes.
Stress.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? All right, we have time. We can squeeze in one last one. All right, vignette number 2. Jack was recently admitted to an inpatient substance abuse treatment facility for a methamphetamine addiction. On his intake forms, he indicated that he was a 32-year-old African-American heterosexual male. During his first week in treatment, he disclosed to his therapist that he is transgender and wishes to use this time in treatment as the beginning of her transition. She requests that she now be referred to as Jackie and would like to be transferred to the female dorms. She states that she has been aware of her transgender status for some time and has been using drugs as a way of coping with living a lie. What do you do?
This is hard because from a medical records perspective, you have Jack records and you have Jackie records. And we actually just came into this issue with a crisis. We have someone who identified as male the first time they came through our department and had a crisis. And the second time they came through, they gave a female name, the same date of birth, same social security number, but there was no record. But when they did the social security search, they found there was a record, but it was under a male gender and a male name, which was completely different. So from a medical records perspective, can I just tell you how confusing this is? But I think for this individual, they're clearly further along in the process.
Let me ask one more person here. Not to put you on the spot.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Tony. So this vignette feels an awful lot like what we deal with periodically here at Farley. And certainly and Tony contributed, and we just changed our policy around transgender issues and really wanted to be inclusive and support folks in recognizing that it is a safe place. And there's a balance there because obviously we deal with an addicted population and there's manipulation and lying and all the stuff that goes along with that. And so to be able to support folks in understanding what it is that they need to be safe and to receive the appropriate treatment is important, and at the same time hold a boundary with folks who are going to manipulate that and say, well, I want to live with the women too. And so we really do have in place a situation now where, particularly if it's, if someone identifies early on in the course of treatment, we can absolutely honor their requests and support them throughout the course of treatment and looking at those issues. If someone is clearly identifying to us initially throughout the entire process of intake and then during all the assessments in the first week or two of treatment, and then doesn't have any kind of history, doesn't have any kind of family corroboration, doesn't have any sort of sense of other than sort of seemingly sort of wanting to do something different, then we'll still honor that request, but it's not going to be living with the other gender in the dorms. So essentially we will give them a place that's safe for them individually so that they can be comfortable, but we won't have them necessarily in a position where they're fully integrated with, I guess would be if it was a male to female situation, we wouldn't have them living with the women in the apartments.
Thank you, Justin. And that was not staged at all, by the way. But what I do want to underscore with that, a situation did arise, and the policy was looked at, and we found it to be lacking. And then reaching out to the community, trying to better adapt a policy that would fit the needs of this unique population. I mean, it was awesome the way it unfolded and took place, and what the results were. And that will be, when you leave here today, the challenge that I extend to you is to be aware, looking for, paying attention to these gaps in the worlds that you live in, that it can be on you. I mean, the people who filled this gap were not transgendered, part of the transgender population. They were merely concerned therapists who saw a point lacking and then took steps to fill it.
And I'll talk while walking back there because we're just about out of time. But we do have the power to be change agents as mental health professionals. And again, referring back to our last presentation where we honed in on the process of being an advocate, it really takes passion, it takes awareness, and it takes being brave. But we have the ability to, rather than sit back and say, well, it's the law, or no, it's the policy of the agency, I have to follow it. We can say, that law is a bad law. That policy isn't inclusive enough. And I have the ability to link with others and create change within this system, within my community, within the nation. And so we do invite you to consider that role that you play in your own agencies and what you can do to support this population. Do you want to add something real quick?
I think it's important to know when you need to refer out. So 12 years ago, I worked at a treatment center with the vignette number 2, and we had dorm-style settings with communal restrooms, and thus it did not meet the client's needs to place them in a female facility, and thus it was important to ensure that we could link them with a facility that could provide them with a setting where they felt safe and where other individuals felt. So sometimes it's outside of your control to fix it, and then you have to advocate to find what's going to be best for the client.
Yes, absolutely. And if you look, this is your last slide. These are resources that are available throughout this region. And the very top link goes to a 50-page document with lawyers, counselors, organizations that are in Virginia for supporting not only transgender but LGB as well. So, as we've stated, this is a true overview, introduction. Hopefully it gave you some awareness of how to identify individuals who are transgender, a few tools to take away, but it ultimately is your invitation to go out and seek more so you can be a competent and effective helper with your transgender clients. So thank you for your time.
What you just attended was a resource, guys. There are other resources out there. Look for them. Be proactive. I know that we do this. We do this as a to do our part. What are we doing with our unearned privileges? There is a 8-hour version of this that covers the LGBTQ community. I know, 8 hours. But that is available out there, so be looking for it. That's something you can bring to your workstation, bring to your work site, bring to your agency. It's broken up into 2 days. So this information needs to get out there, guys. Yes, ma'am. There should be an email address in that booklet there. You can send me an email and I can give you the information.